This is Louis7, and in this video I want to talk about Update 28 War of the Three Peaks Open Beta in Lord of the Rings Online, and how it is off to a very rough start, which has been frustrating and a bit disappointing so far. However, the good news is this is a beta, which is the period of testing before the patch goes live. So with that, there can be changes implemented, bug fixes, and improvements can be made before we actually see it in live release next month in October, and hopefully we do see that. And just so everyone knows, the background gameplay is from the beta of Update 28, where I'm running through new missions mostly and just discovering that system in a little bit more with the update. But the very first thing I want to jump into with this video is that the preview build for Update 28 that we were given kind of felt more like an alpha than a beta, actually. So for anybody unfamiliar, LOTRO does have a private alpha, which is the Palantir server, but that is private again, and because people who test on it have to sign like non-disclosure agreements and all that, we don't get to know anything from those. And I have never actually played an alpha or on the Palantir server, but the point for this video is that the first beta build for Update 28 feels like what I would expect actually from an alpha build, and there was a lot of incomplete feeling in the beta and some major bugs that made whole systems non-functional. And first off, the patch notes were not complete. The patch notes contain a very, very small list of the things that were different or added in the actual beta build of Update 28 that I played on. And the very first thing here is that all they have listed for the War of the Three Peaks is coming soon. So right off the bat, we actually aren't given details on anything the mini expansion contains that is actually in the beta that we are playing. And this is something that definitely contributes to the rough start of the beta for me. It made me feel like, before I even got into the beta actually, that the patch was rushed for us to preview and they didn't have time to actually tell us what was in the patch, is what it felt like going in. But the next thing is we did get to know about some class and item changes and bug fixes to quests and adventure areas and some old areas, and just some miscellaneous changes, but all of that is the type of stuff we usually see in like a regular patch or even minor updates, minor patches. So it didn't really give us detail on what was going to be in Update 28 or in the beta build we are able to preview it. It didn't give us detail on what we should expect from the War of the Three Peaks mini expansion. So just based off the notes while I was finishing up my overview video and getting into actually playing the beta, I felt like this was a tiny patch based on that, and we weren't really given any information about what was coming. Again, just based off the patch notes for Update 28 beta, I would not have known the new featured system called Missions was coming. I also wouldn't have known about there being a new zone, which we now know is Elderslade, and I also wouldn't have known there was a raid or even 6-man instance. I think that is all the type of information that would have been good to not only just like list, but it would have been good to have known more about it and given more insight into it going into the open beta that we have now. And at this point, it is good to remind everyone, that, including myself, that this is a beta to test out and preview things, but kind of my point here is it certainly didn't get the overall beta experience off to a great start with these patch notes and not much communication with that. So it actually made the update feel underwhelming, and it feels underwhelming to me because of that, if anything. But moving on from that, I do want to mention that I personally had a frustrating time getting into the Bullroarer launcher and client, unfortunately. Basically, my Bullroarer install I had became broken, even though I actually had it installed and it updated and patched earlier in the day and the day before, but I ultimately had to repair the game data. It wasn't until after a few hours later until I was able to get in and more fully connected to the beta. So that was just a personal frustration I did have to deal with, and I mentioned it because it meant I got to testing things out very late. But by the time I did get into Bullroarer, I was actually very excited to stream my preview of the update as I saw everything for the first time. So with that, I was very interested to see the new zone, the new mission system, and even poke my head into the 6-man instance and 12-man raid that weren't listed in the patch notes, but due to my delay, I actually saw other people share that at least some of those things were in the beta build we previewed. Alright, so this video has been going on quite long, and I have not even yet talked about the actual content of the update, and it really was unfortunate that the beta was off to a rough start before I even got to playing it, but the actual content I experienced certainly didn't help, unfortunately. So first off, there were tons of bugs around the mission system where it was essentially half broken. And very importantly, the mission system sounds like it is what is supposed to set this update apart from regular quest packs to make it worth that mini expansion title where you have to buy it even as a VIP and can't get it in the LOTRO store right away. But anyway, having that not work well was a very bad thing, I think, for Standing Stone Games if they want people to get excited about the War of the Three Peaks mini expansion, feel like it is worth spending money on. And at the end of this section, I will note that they have a new update to the same Bullroarer build, so I'll talk about that at the end of this section on the missions. But to go on with the issues that it had, and still has mostly, is first of all, I will be focusing a lot of my time on missions here, but to start off, my first character I logged in on was at level 130, and he got no introduction quests for the missions. My other characters did, but as this was my first time going through, I didn't know you were actually supposed to get an intro quest until I did go on one of my alts. So that's the first part that was buggy for me. I will say the only character I did not get this on was my level 130 character. If that had any impact because he was at the level cap, I have no idea, but definitely seems buggy. Otherwise, when you actually go to do the introduction quest, there are a few issues, mainly with some weird progression and parts of quest not progressing actually as described. But after a bit of traveling, you can finally make it to the war room, which I have to say the war room itself is set up pretty nicely. You do have 2 dwarves at a table with the Elder Slade map, and each of them have about 40 missions for you to choose from, so a lot of options there. But you also have a daily quest to complete 3 missions and a weekly quest to complete that daily quest 4 times. And finally, there is a barter vendor for the marks that you get from running the missions. And now we get to start the actual bad stuff from the missions themselves, and even though I have been rambling on about other stuff for so long, this is actually what is making the Update 28 beta experience start very poorly to me. So first off, the introduction quest for the mission system is broken, actually was broken. They have fixed that, as you will probably see in the background gameplay. It actually works on my champion. But the quest has you run a mission. The introduction quest has you run a mission, and in the middle of that mission there was a bug preventing you from continuing the mission about after a minute in. So kind of at this point, I didn't know what all this quest chain involved. It seemed like because this was bugged, we couldn't advance this introduction quest. It seemed like there would be a quest chain to take you through a bunch of missions and just do things like that. But on the first day of the beta, we weren't actually able to preview it because it was broken. And overall, that just didn't help the beta experience. Having that broken like right from the get-go, that's another thing that made it seem like an alpha, because something as simple as that was just like completely broken. And yeah, it just didn't help the beta experience get off to a good start. But next off, the daily quest to complete 3 missions was also broken. I tested out quite a few missions on different characters that the daily just never progressed for that, so I didn't actually get to test out how that progressed because it didn't progress at all. And I will say this is another thing that has been fixed. They've already patched this, and I'm really not sure what went wrong there, but the daily is progressing you. But that's just something. It's another thing that didn't help my beta experience and made it start off kind of roughly. And then another thing that was, and finally still is broken, is the chest you get to loot at the end of the mission. So it's actually broken because it's only available for level 130s. Now this could, I admit, be an intended feature that players level 20 to 129, so the huge percent of level possibilities of the players, they don't get a reward, which, by the way, the reward from the chest only contains a couple of those barter marks, which are called Gabalaka war marks, by the way. And that felt more broken to me than rather as an intention, but at least I just surely hope that wasn't intended. And I think if it was, it needs to be 100% changed. It makes no sense that a level 20 to 129 can't actually get a reward from the missions, even though they're able to participate in them. And then I'll get to the actual rewards from the marks later, which is going to be another issue. But for now, there were some other specific missions that are broken and some minor annoyances or buggy things with the missions, and that's still true after their little update earlier today. But what I want to talk about next is the actual missions content. So the missions were originally advertised as being more involved than regular quests. So like one mission would be about 2 to 3 quests is what it was. I think specifically mentioned that they were supposed to be about 2 to 3 quests worth of content each. And my experience so far with missions is that was way overselling it, and that a good chunk of missions are essentially a single quest's worth of content at most. Some of the missions are actually like portions of a quest, and just to demonstrate that, a lot of them are to do things like pick up a few items or destroy a few items, or even some are kill 10 mobs and you are just like magically done after that. And keep in mind with the missions, you are only running a single mission at a time. You don't have like multiple missions that take you to the same area or any quest to go along with them for the instance or anything. So you have one mission at one time, which is like super short, 1 to 2 minutes, as you're hopefully seeing in the background on my champion is probably what's going on. But that to me was a bit of a letdown from what they were advertised to be. I know we only got an early preview earlier, and that's just what they were advertised to be, so this was a letdown seeing that. But I will say, looking more positively, I don't think that is actually a problem if some missions are shorter ones, but I would like to see some more involved, especially because that's what it was like advertised, that's what it's said to be, or that's how at least I interpreted it. 2 to 3 quests worth of content I think would be more than just kill 10 mobs. But I really hope to see some more involved, especially by release. For all we know, it could be incomplete for this beta build, and that's at least what I have to hope for. But moving on, we can now talk about the rewards from the mission system, which are underwhelming at best. As I mentioned in my hopes for update 28 video, I thought the mission system sounded like a perfect feature to reward Virtue XP, and after playing through it I thought the same thing. But let me actually backtrack and first talk about what we do get from the missions as they are now in the beta. So from a single mission you get reputation and XP and maybe a few silver if I remember correctly, but that money you get is insignificant anyway. So really you don't get much. It's just like standard quest rewards, not even gear or anything, which is pretty much a standard quest reward. But okay, considering that, maybe the reward chest from the missions that I mentioned that low-level characters don't get, but maybe those give you something good. Nope on that. The chests, if you are lucky enough again to be level 130 in the first place, they give you a couple of Gabalaka war marks and a couple hundred silver, so nothing exciting from that. Alright, so maybe because those chests don't give anything and the quests don't give anything, maybe the war marks can be bartered for some nice stuff at least. Nope to that as well, because it's actually mostly nope because there are quite a few cosmetics, and I admittedly like a lot of the cosmetics, they're pretty neat. But that is it, just cosmetics and mounts, and I think your regular travel skills, but that might actually be the Gundabad barter that's separate from the Gabalaka ones. But you don't get much from the actual missions, the mission quests, or the marks from the missions, so do you get anything good for the daily or weekly quests that I mentioned for these missions? And you probably see where I'm going with this, and it is a big fat nope to that as well. So for both of those you get Gabalaka war marks, and you do get a small amount of motes of enchantment, not embers of enchantment. But again, that is it. That's all you get from the missions, and those are, yeah, all the rewards. And just to summarize, that is a very small amount of motes of enchantment and cosmetics, and then the usual reputation, character, and item XP. So that to me is all a giant letdown for the mission system, on top of the rough start I had with the missions being so buggy and the quests involving them being extra buggy on top of that. And after all that, I found out that the rewards aren't much, especially because this was really promoted as being what sets this update apart, as being called a mini expansion versus a regular quest pack. There's just not much to it, especially the rewards here. And just to point out, we do not get any gear pieces, no matter what level you are, and no other character progression such as Virtue XP, as I mentioned earlier. I think they'd be perfect for that, or chances for like legendary item boosting items like Scroll of Empowerment or whatever heritage that could be a little bit flexible to character level. And you don't even need that. You could have like regular scalable gear drops in them. The mobs in there do drop items, but that's like just regular things that mobs do. They drop level appropriate items, crafting mats, potions, that sort of stuff. But you don't have like the regular scalable gear drops for an end of mission reward, or at least a chance for that. And there's just basically a whole bunch of nothing besides, again, the cosmetics. And for a positive note, again, I do like the cosmetics that are there. But I plan to make a whole video on the issues with missions. I know I've gone on about them, it looks like, for about 10 minutes here already in this video, but I do plan to have a whole video on them. And I think the missions are a very significant part of update 28. And it's really significant part of it being off to a very rough start for me, unfortunately. But moving on to another topic which should be shorter is the whole instance and raid ordeal. So we had the issues of this getting no mention in the patch notes. Besides, it was actually specifically mentioned with the Isengard Tavern, which is just for Bullroarer. But first off, the 6-man instance was not in the beta build, but the raid was. There's kind of this inconsistency, and we really don't know why this is, but that's just what the beta build had. And really the whole issue here, I think, actually boils down to the first thing I talked about the patch notes and lack of communication about what this beta build was supposed to have. I feel like I'm going back to my improvements LOTRO needs video where I mentioned open communication would be a great thing, and this is like the perfect example of we aren't getting the communication, so we don't really know what's going on, even though we're able to test this. It's an open beta build. But that topic was a lot shorter than missions, and there is one more thing I want to cover that helped get this update off to a rough start, the beta for it, that is. And this is kind of focusing more on what the update did not contain. Of course, again, this is beta and things can hopefully be improved before release, or maybe we are just not even seeing the full picture on that. We don't really know. Again, the whole no communication thing there. But the first thing with the update is I was actually excited for this update to potentially have the legendary item revamp to be in it. And the LI revamp, for anybody unfamiliar, was like intended to be released, I think, in late 2020, but we have been given no word on this. And I know plenty of people were hoping for this revamp with update 28 just to make it, even though it's not the actual content of War of the Three Peaks, but it would make it a little bit more worth it being called a mini expansion, just knowing we're getting some additional thing like a full system revamp on top of it. But right now, there are some players, and that does include me, that suspects the LI revamp may be delayed and pushed back to 2021 because of various issues going on. But not having that, at least for me, made the mini expansion update less exciting for sure, or at least the beta for it again. So that was actually the main thing for this section, just really no LI revamp. There are a whole bunch of other things I could go on about, but those would be less realistic to actually expect to be in the update. But on top of that, that is actually pretty much everything that made the update off to a rough start for me. Just to quickly review, there was the issues with the patch notes being incomplete and no communication about this beta build, and finally a lack of upcoming LI revamp, among other things. Alright, I don't want to end this video on this bad note, so I do want to mention some things from the update 28 beta build that I did like and make it look exciting. So before that, I once again do want to say this is a beta, which means changes can be made, features of the update can be improved, and some new things can be added. So looking positively, I am excited to see where all of this is going with the update, even though it has been off to a very rough start so far. But to move on, the first thing I am liking is the actual region of Elderslade. The zone looks pretty nice overall and has a few very interesting areas, and some of it reminds me a little bit of Forestall in a very good way. But it was fun to just explore, and I'm thinking eventually it should be fun to quest in. And now I will say I don't like questing in betas in general. I like to save that for the full live patch to experience it fresh there, but it looked like the quest content from what I saw could be exciting as well to go along with the landscape. And also we are of course at war with the orcs in this area. It's the War of the Three Peaks. But having the dragon theme in this region continued in the Elderslade zone was nice, and that actually reminds me, there were these flying drakes that are really cool and give you quite the experience in Even Rush when you just roam around the land of Elderslade. That'll be a fun experience if you all have seen those. But otherwise, I have heard Tier 1 of the new raid is easy, totally transitioning from the region, but of course, balance with the raid could change and all the such. But I think, just as a general thing, having Tier 1 be easy for non-raider type players, I actually think is a good thing to allow more players to experience the new content, in this case, the new raid. So having Tier 1, specifically the first tier, the first entry level difficulty be like pretty easy. But then for people that want difficulty, there are always higher tiers, which can make the content a lot more difficult and a lot more rewarding, which that aspect is definitely exciting as well. But I realized this section was super short because that was it, but those are the aspects of the update I am liking so far. There's not much to the update besides the new region, the new raid and instance, and the missions. But again, mainly it has to do with what I'm liking is with the Elderslade region, and at the end of this section, I do actually want to talk about missions, because even if there are all these issues with the system, and the missions actually making the update start poorly, I gotta say I am excited to eventually run all of them and get the full experience of the War of the Three Peaks. Anyway, we can go ahead and wrap up this video, and hopefully some of the things that made the Update 28 War of the Three Peaks beta start off in a rough state will be changed and improved for the better in the future, and when it actually comes to a live patch. And I will of course be continuing to follow and explore the new beta builds with you all, and otherwise I actually do plan to make a video covering specifically what changes the mission system needs, in my opinion at least, and I will have other videos on the update as usual. But for this video, I hope you all enjoyed it and learned about Update 28, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more, and thanks for watching everyone.